In today's panel discussion, Revitalizing Libraries and Media Centers for Modern Students, educational professionals will discuss how to transform libraries and media centers to meet the standards of modern learning and collaboration spaces. Each panelist will take about 10 minutes to introduce themselves, discuss a recent project they've worked on, and answer a couple questions. After that, we'll do an open discussion with a couple of group questions and questions from the audience. And then we'll finish up with a quick word from our sponsor. Our panelists are in alphabetical order. It's Alison Andrews, Principal and PK-12 Educational Planner at Wold Architects and Engineers. And then Steve Cunningham, AIA Lead AP, Director of Academic at Construction firm Columbia. We have Nick Perry, AIA Lead AP, Senior Associate at Perkins & Will. And then we have Ashley J. Stoner, AIA, Lead AP, BD+C, Senior Associate at DLR Group. All right, and we're going to start off with Nick. Nick is a Senior Associate at Perkins & Will, and he's going to be talking about the Idea Center at Lindbergh High School in St. Louis, Missouri. Nick, take it away.
Thanks so much, Matt. I'm so happy to be here. So yes, I'm an architect with Perkins & Will in Chicago. I've been working exclusively designing learning environments for more than a decade for pre-K through 12 and higher ed institutions across the country. So here, I think my focus largely for today is on K through 12. So before the invention of the printing press, libraries began as a place to house print materials like books and manuscripts because they were precious and rare and only the most wealthy could afford them. So libraries became focused on giving free access to knowledge for the masses. So today, access to information is in the palms of our hands and we're constantly connected. So how have libraries shifted? We're seeing libraries have reinvented themselves as a full service concierge, connecting people not just to information and collections, but tools, technology, and communities of knowledge. So focusing today on K through 12 libraries, this is where learning modalities, technology, collaboration, and creation are shaping the infrastructure that libraries need to deliver their new mission. We're seeing a shift in space allocation, reducing space for print media and increasing space for engagement. We find that students still want to be around books in the library. They enjoy that experience, but they're no longer simply browsing the stacks. So access to physical collections becomes more focused. Libraries are weeding their collections and that vacated space in the library is becoming devoted to engagement. Alongside that shift in allocation is space allocation is a shift in focus from consumption to creation. Libraries are being transformed from grocery stores of collections into collaborative kitchens for experimentation. They've become places for problem solving and entrepreneurship. We're seeing a shift from tool users to tool builders and an equal demand on the space types and technologies to support this. So this may look familiar. The library of yesterday with those rows and rows of tall stacks and wood furniture in a mostly quiet reading room. But the new role of the library now as media centers and learning commons demands agility and new types of spaces. Libraries are more open and flexible with seating in a variety of shapes and postures. Gone are the rows of tall stacks, which are replaced with low height, often mobile stacks. The low stacks make the space feel open and connected, give opportunity to display our favorite books on top. So we're talking about elementary school, like this example here at Lyle. These low stacks place content within the reach of the student. And like this example, the library is often planned at the center or the heart of the school with activity all around it and through it. Flexible mobile furniture provides increased flexibility of use. We're creating these multi-use zones like a seating area that can flex for meetings, collaboration, instruction, or group study. This flexibility gives schools an incredible bang for their buck and avoids underutilized space. And we talk about postures for our youngest learners. Don't underappreciate the floor. Kids love to lay down and sit, say in a bean bag, but just because they look comfortable doesn't mean that they're not learning. As libraries shift towards collaboration, we cannot forget about space for the individual. Quiet spaces like reading nooks or even single-use quiet study rooms or pods. It's important to offer a variety of space to reach all users. The modern library may include spaces for innovation and creation, like a green screen or recording studio, enabling exploration in a variety of new media. We're also seeing podcasting rooms or one-button studios for audio-only media sources. And places for making, for those hands-on learners to express themselves in a physical world through prototyping and design. This is a critical hub for exploration. So let's head back to this library of yesterday, which is actually the former library at Lindbergh High School in St. Louis, one of my clients. And before our work with Lindbergh, they had this California-style campus with 5 separate buildings. Students had to traverse between buildings to get to class. We demolished a few of those outdated buildings and designed a 212,000 square foot addition, which physically stitched their campus back together. The building unites their community and reinforces collaboration and the innovative teaching models at Lindbergh. We relocated this library, their new library learning commons, quite literally at the crossroads of their new campus. This library is front and center at the main entrance, located along some major thoroughfares in the school. Students are in and out of this library constantly. It gets a lot of use. We kept that same spirit of a 2-story library where each floor sort of takes on its own character of use. Here at level 1, on the right, some open flexible space. This is one of those multi-use zones that I mentioned. This space flexes for meetings, collaboration, or instruction. There's low height stacks throughout, a series of small group study or collaboration rooms in the lower right. Also a podcasting room where students can create content with recording equipment. Now this is the open reading room area with the resource desk connecting stair up to the level above. If you look closely in the background, you can see a counter with 3D printers for a small making area. Also take note of those mobile tables and chairs on wheels for added flexibility. Level 2 includes dedicated instructional space and a writing center you see on the right. Both support curriculum developed by the librarians. So modern librarians are not just there to help you find your book. They are also educators and ambassadors of exploration, research, and discovery. This floor features collaborative seating areas with more of a variety of furniture postures on this level, from group tables to stools at a counter or lounge chairs where you can curl up with a book. So that's the new high school library, but the district still needed to decide what they wanted to do with their existing space in this unique round building. Well, it was transformed into the Idea Center, a centralized facility for the district's gifted education programming for elementary students. Now, this is an innovative and largely project-based learning program, and it demands a similar array of spaces, a variety of spaces that a modern library or media center would include. Their programming has smaller class sizes and educators who often teach in interdisciplinary teams. These students need access to resources and technology to support this exploration and their project work. So level 1 here features an open, flexible central hub for large instruction or project work. While we called it the Central Commons, the students have now lovingly named it the Donut Hole. And if you look closely, physical collections are still there. They're strewn throughout the building and built-in bookshelves around the perimeter. So each floor has a small group room, places to display student work like this, and a variety of seating types for each student to find their favorite place to study or collaborate. The ground floor has a modest administrative area. They're in orange, nurses' clinic, storage, a multi-purpose room, which is where the students actually have lunch and do other activities. Lunch is prepared in the adjacent high school. Remember, this is physically connected to the high school building and brought in here for the students. The typical classroom becomes an open and flexible studio, very agile, with an instructional side and a makerspace side, which comes equipped with a sink, storage, and power for tools and equipment. They can easily transition and flex from direct instruction to group work or project work in a space like this. So whether it's a modern library learning commons or even a gifted learning center, these are the types of spaces and flexibility that support the exploration of modern students that we hope prepare them for future careers that don't even exist yet. Thanks, Matt.
No, thank you. That was great. I think we do have time for, I think, one quick question. You mentioned that the converging issues facing libraries that put a demand on their infrastructure. Do you find any particular design challenges or any kind of overlooked design components that are critical for the Modern Library Media Center to support collaboration, modes of learning, and technologies?
Yeah, Matt, I think quality acoustical design is really important here. So now we have a variety of uses that are coexisting in the library. And those multi-use spaces that we talked about, they need infrastructure to be able to flex between uses. So it's really important that we consider and separate loud spaces from quiet spaces. That comes through partially through thoughtful planning. We also need to use the proper types of acoustic treatments to ensure that we have good quality speech intelligibility and prevent sound transfer. We have to remember that our youngest learners are more sensitive to sound. They don't have the same cognitive abilities that us adults do to sort of fill in between the blanks, right? If we missed out or had blacked out every fourth word, we would still understand the gist. The students haven't developed that ability yet. So they're quite literally, they're not missing every fourth word, they're missing the lesson. And the last one, I think, is no surprise, but access to power. We know how these open and flexible spaces with movable furniture, but people still need to plug in their device and do the work. So with that, new technologies and equipment needs power and data to support them too.
Okay, great. Perfect. Thank you so much. That was great. And I think one small thing that I noticed is the more we talk about library media centers renovation, sometimes I always just wonder what happened to the books. And I'm glad that there's still space for those also. I think next up, we have Ashley Stoner. She's a senior associate with DLR Group, and she'll be talking about the Library Learning Commons from Chaffee College in California. And Ashley, go ahead.
Hi, everyone.
Oh.
Yep, again, I'm Ashley Stoner. I'm a designer and architect with over 20 years of experience from educational facilities, K through 12, into higher ed, and dabbling in healthcare and well-being, et cetera. So I'm pleased to talk about our Library Learning Commons from Chaffee College, which is a 2-year community college in Rancho Cucamonga, California. So I want to start, and I think you'll see a lot of the same themes that Nick was speaking about, but I wanted to give some community context to the college. This is their Rancho Cucamonga campus. The college has history dating back to 1883, but this project is the first domino in the master plan of reimagining this campus. We're actually replacing the existing library building with a completely new Library Learning Commons. You can see there in orange is the site. And so it would actually start to frame a new quad for the campus and start to make connections. So I think the sitting of the actual destination is important, and how connections can be made across the campus. There's actually a 15-foot grade difference between the north side of the campus with views to the mountains to the left there, and then to that lower area, that centralized place. Chaffee College, this campus, 84% of the student population are students of color, and 46% of the population are first-generation college students. So when we think about resources for students, it's really important to find identity and make it easy to find the resources that these students need for success. So when we conceived of the project, we wanted to make those connections, really pulling the community through the building, making a centralized space, making connections to the environment, views to the mountains, views to the plaza, and making a library that's porous even. We do have the benefits of Southern California. So how do we take advantage of those places so that instead, libraries, instead of being insular buildings, they could actually be buildings that expand and connect. So this is our view from the north parking lot, starting to be really inviting and making the library a destination that pulls people through. Here we have the centralized 3-story space. So much like Nick's donut, if you will, a space where people can gather and connect and socialize in a library instead of just being quiet and studying. So here's a section through our building from the higher 15-foot level down to the plaza. And as Nick mentioned, the acoustics being really important. So we actually conceived of the library as this layered building that went from kind of boisterous and loud all the way to quiet at the top. The top floor is actually enclosed with glass so that it is a little more acoustically quiet. And that's where the majority of the book collection resides. So we had this idea of the bottom floor being gathering and then growing and then discovering as you move throughout the building. And here's our 3 levels showing that kind of entry space on the bottom left, and then the stacks on the bottom right. And it was important for us to provide a lot of different gathering type areas, sometimes for individual study, sometimes for group study, sometimes to be together with a bunch of people, or just to find that resource that you need. We have a student learning center, student success center on the ground floor for tutoring. On the second floor, we have classrooms. And on the third floor, we have more small meeting rooms that students can check out and meet and have those little assignments that they can work on. So you can see that variety of spaces, including on the ground floor, some media spaces for future technologies. And then what's unique about this project is that the district is actually commissioning an artist to do a mural as part of the project. Sam Dunson is providing a Juneteenth mural that's in a prominent spot in our project. So when we talk about exterior materials, it was really important for us to bring in textures of the environment, brick from the campus. In the middle there, you have a picture of a cork oak tree, which are spread throughout the campus, and starting to reflect some of those textures, not only in the exterior, but also in the interior, because we know that school can be stressful, and having these calming influences can start to bring a sense of place and a sense of biophilic design into the environment. So here's a view of one of our collaboration areas that have a view to the north. You can see that the carpet and the wall textures are brought in from those environments. We're actually playing with textures as you move up through the building and giving some of that differentiation. Here's another view of our 3-story space that's glassed off at the top with views to the mountains. So thinking about expanding via views throughout the campus. We also intentionally used wood as a differentiator for where students could get these touch points of help. So this is our entry desk as you come in from the north parking lot. And this is not only for security in a way, but also for a point of entry and a point for any questions. So similarly on the 3rd floor, which this particular space could also be used as a collaboration, you can see the books here beyond. And it was really important for us to actually provide spaces to study within the stacks. So in this world that everything's digital, to actually still have that experience of being between the books and studying in the stacks. And finally, our social stair, which has that wood differentiation in addition to the circulation desk on the left. So you can see that we're carving this mass away and trying to provide those indoor-outdoor spaces, extending the textures in, and providing that fluidity between the campus and the destination. The image in the bottom right is a little plaza that the staff particularly wanted for their events. This project has a number of staff areas spread out, which I think is really important for staff collaboration. And finally, a wraparound deck that's an extension of that top floor where students and community can come out and have views of the valley. So in the end, this is our view from the new sort of quad for the campus. And topping out is December 12th, and we're hoping it's just going to be an iconic building that the district envisioned. Yep.
Thanks. No, the building looks fantastic. I think one thing that we did want to ask is that the library's design prioritizes connection and inclusivity. And can you talk about how to create a shared space for everyone that meets the individual needs of an entire college campus's worth of students?
Yeah, as mentioned, it was really important for us to address student needs, and especially the this potentially at-risk population that may be the first one in their family that went to college. So by providing touch points for help, a social environment, and really reflecting the community, we felt that gave the project a sense of place and inclusiveness that the students could relate to.
Okay. And then we did want to thank you for your time and your expertise. Thanks for being here. And the project looks great. I think next up we have Steve Cunningham. He's the Director of Academic at Construction Management from Columbia. And he's going to talk about Snell Library at Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts. Steve, thanks so much for being here, and it's all yours.
Thank you, Matt, and hi, everybody. So I'm currently a construction manager working at Columbia, but I have also worked as an architect. I practiced for about 25 years, and I've also been on the owner's side about 8 years on a campus. So, and my experience has all been in the academic sector. So it's either been K through 12 or college and university work. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Snell Library, which is, kind of the hub of campus at Northeastern University in Boston. A little bit of a different setting than Ashley's project, no mountains in the background. It's more of an urban location. And I'll talk a little bit. It's about a 200,000 square foot building, and we did a major renovation of the building, really top to bottom, with an addition on the first floor as well. And just a little bit about the organization of the building, because it's, as everyone's talked about, there are a lot of different program elements in a building like this. And there are, so many kind of competing needs in the building. So there's a little bit of an organizational structure that the design team used to kind of control some of that. On the left is a similar diagram to what Ashley showed, where things go from quiet to, from loud at the entry to quiet at the top. So there are 5 floors. On the lower level is collections and archives, and on the first floor is essentially a welcome center, and there's a help desk there. There's a cafe for students, and there's also an event space on that floor. As you go up the building and you look at the second floor, that's the area where students create. So there are maker spaces there, all kinds of experiential learning opportunities. And then when you go up to the third floor, it's more about research, how the students are collaborating with one another on research and how they're collaborating with staff. And similar to Ashley's diagram, on the top is all about focus. It's about quiet study, either on your own or in a group setting, but in enclosed spaces where that kind of focus can be attained. So there are two areas highlighted in green on the plan here. One is this major stair that goes through the building, and the other is what is called the Greenway, and it's kind of an organizing principle where a lot of the functions kind of operate off of the Greenway, but this is kind of a distinct element, and it's highlighted by different architectural kind of moves that make it stand out. So I'm going to jump to the next slide, and this gives you a little image of here's a section through the building and that stair, and these images on the right are of the stair, and you can see it's a very open stair, all glass. When we came into this building, this was a fire stair, and just to give you a picture of a fire stair, very enclosed. And the team at Northeastern, they really wanted to see this, this element opened up so that there'd be connections between floors, and there'd be more of a sense of, connection from top to bottom within the building. And we achieved that with all this glass and with, kind of reworking the design of the stair. But also it's still a fire stair. So there are wand doors that close in front of this glass in the event of a fire and provide that rating that's required. The lower left gives you a little bit of a glimpse of the Greenway. Some of the ceiling elements, there's a consistent pattern there, and some of the colors that are brought in and the furniture they used there kind of highlights that space on each floor. Some of the unique spaces in the building, there's a large event space on the first floor, and with a really big video screen up the front, and it's shown in this configuration right now, but that whole wall is a video screen. It can be configured in innumerable ways. On the right, these are they're called phone booths. It's just a small space where students can go in there to either make a phone call or to do a Zoom meeting or something that they need to do in quiet. They're very acoustically separating from the rest of the space. In the lower left, these elements that are kind of set into the space without a top, they actually do have a ceiling in them, but they appear to be this kind of loose volume that's floating in the space. We call these the pods, and you can see there are pods that allow for a singular person to study or group study or even in larger kind of event or group connecting spaces. Furniture is a huge element in the building. You can see, students use these kind of furniture pieces to have, their own little space. You can pull these together to have more of a group connection, but in a more private setting. And then there are tables and chairs that move around, and there are these booths, again, for connecting small groups. And you can see in the back here, there's a movable marker board, not only for, writing things on or drawing things, but it's also to kind of create space within the open area, because there's a lot of open area in this in the footprint. On the lower level is the archives. Yes, there are books in this library. So there's a series of stacks at one end, again, student, spaces in the center. There are areas where students can gather and do research or connect with staff to be able to find things. And, they've had archives in the building forever, but they tried to make an effort to make it a lot more accessible and inviting to the students. And I just want to touch on the ceilings in this space, because there was a lot of attention paid in the design of the ceiling systems. And a lot of it is centered around acoustics, and a lot of it is centered around how do we define space in different ways in large open areas. So on the left, we had a lot of open ceiling, and all the areas that are exposed like this were sprayed with K13, which is a sound insulating product, and then everything was painted a dark color to kind of blend it all in. And where there were ceilings, there were several different ceiling types. This we call the butterfly, pretty intricate design to differentiate some spaces. And this kind of finned element was used in the greenway. So you'd see that element on each floor. And again, it would kind of define that greenway space throughout the building. So that's Snell Library. Thank you, Matt.
No, thank you. I think I did have one quick question, and it was, can you tell us more about the library's expanded creative and design production zone as another new type of learning space that might not have been seen in libraries 15, 20 years ago? And then how was the building designed for future readiness in terms of archives and special collections?
Yeah, sure. So Northeastern has, kind of a rich history of hands-on learning. It's really a bellwether for who they are. They're renowned for their co-op curriculum that gives students that real-world experience away from campus. Mostly to help students learn in that way, but also to help them discern their careers. Everybody comes into college with some different ideas, but it really takes that experience and hands-on learning to kind of figure that out sometimes. And this kind of attitude and approach, it also shows up in a lot of the spaces that are on campus. Studios, maker spaces, experiential labs, these are all common throughout Northeastern. And on the second floor of the Snell Library, some of these spaces were created to kind of carry that theme through into the library. For example, there's an audio video studio and a post-production lab. There's a tech garage for, kind of student experimentation with technology and 3D scanning, those kinds of elements. And there's a whole suite of staff on that floor as well who focus on experiential learning so that students have guidance about, how to implement some of their creative energy that they bring and, some of the ideas that they can work through with kind of hands-on work. As far the second part of your question was about future readiness, relative to the archives. Definitely an important thing because they place a lot of value on their archives, and preserving them is definitely a key. And one of the things that was done in this project was, a humidification system to be able to make sure that those documents are, maintained and they're not going to degrade over time. There are storage elements that help to, kind of put them in the right environment as well. The other side of it is really all about technology, from the institutional side as to, how they are, duplicating some of this stuff or carrying that information into technology, and perhaps even using AI to, make their documents resistant to whatever's going to happen in terms of change in technology or, even physical things that could happen to documents.
Okay. No, great. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
And then our last individual panelist is Alison Anders. She's a principal and PK-12 educational planner at Wold Architects and Engineers, and she'll be talking about designing learning spaces that support student wellness. Alison, go ahead.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. And thank you to all of my fellow panelists, because I think a lot of what kind of the topic I wanted to bring to the group is really already been showcased in a lot of the images and the conversation that we've had so far. So I'm hoping that I will just be echoing and bringing a lot of that home. But kind of the focal point when it comes to wellness in design is really about creating spaces for students. And I want to say that again, that these are spaces that are for our students. I think that traditional model certainly provided support for learning. But when we look at libraries today, it is really creating environments that feel comfortable, that feel like a place students really want to be, want to engage with, and support that hands-on learning and collaboration. So really, when we even look at our youngest learners in today's environments, you're going to see a lot of these various zones that create space for individual learning. But it also supports that small group collaboration, whether it's me just sitting next to my friend talking or reading a book, or working at a small group table on a project and just talking more about our day. But even larger than that is looking to engage with the larger group, creating space for large group discussion for an entire class to come together and learn on a topic. And so through that, you see a lot of that varied furniture. And I know Steve was just hitting on this in some of his slides. It's having that variety that supports all of those different functions and brings a mix of opportunities for students to choose from and kind of decide what is the best place for me to go, sit, learn, and engage. When I talk about kind of our youngest learners too, it's not even simply just the furniture. It's really also just creating environments that students want to be in. And that might be bringing in vibrant colors. It might be bringing in some different imagery that makes them feel like they're, sitting on a tire swing outside in their backyard reading a book. Those types of things may seem simple or may seem not as impactful as they truly are, and they are. I've had a great opportunity of engaging with even kindergartners to say, what do you want your library to look and feel like? And their eyes, they get wide, they get bright, and they get excited to think about what these spaces can create and provide for them. Another consideration, though, is thinking about how these spaces can really be opened up. And this is typically a little bit easier to achieve, maybe if you're looking at a renovation or some type of building addition where you have some opportunity to create larger volumes. Not to say that it can't be done within an existing footprint, it certainly can. But creating opportunities where you bring in that natural light, you create that connection between both the interior and the exterior environment. And if you're someone that lives in a climate like I do, where we've got super sunny, bright spring days, but when that winter comes, there's maybe not much opportunity to get out and enjoy the sunlight. Having wide open spaces that still allow you to engage in that way really goes a long way in supporting my personal wellness, the students' wellness, rather than being kind of in an enclosed space where they don't have that chance to see outside while it is bright and light out. How many of us have been getting home late at night and it's darker and darker by the time we get there, even now? But another consideration that I did want to talk a little bit about, it's a little bit different, and it's not always a point of conversation directly tied to student wellness, but I think is really an impactful design choice, is the adaptability of a lot of these spaces, the flexibility and adaptability. In this image, you kind of see what maybe looks like a traditional classroom space that actually opens up to the library beyond. And we've seen this in a lot of different ways where it's creating connections to those other environments that allow you to make some different choices based on what you need today. So perhaps you have a large group that's going into that library and you want to be respectful of students that are also in that space learning and sitting quietly and doing more of a research or individually driven activity. You can close this space out. You can have a loud, messy group activity going on in here without disrupting the rest of the space. Or you can open it up and it's just a regular day, and now I can move this furniture around and maybe I want to go work individually in this space because it's got my favorite chair. I don't know. But having some of that adaptability, that flexibility, really, I think, goes a long way in supporting that overall wellness of all of the occupants and all of the people that are really going to engage with these spaces. And kind of taking a step forward from that, this is kind of the same project that I just showed you, but one of the other challenges that a lot of our school districts are facing that we've worked with is that they're meeting they're meeting the varied needs of a very diverse student population. And in some cases, it might mean that traveling to a centralized library location isn't really the best solution for them. That isn't really going to create the best opportunity. So something else that we're seeing is this idea of decentralized resource environments that ultimately serve as an extension of the library. It's a great place to create an environment where you can share resources. Maybe it's for a few classrooms, maybe it's for an entire grade level, much like you do in a library setting where we're sharing resources, we're sharing amenities, but now we're doing it at a little bit of a smaller scale. You'll still see sort of that flexibility, some different, furniture options, integration of technology, all of those things, but now it's on a scale where it's a little bit closer to where I'm spending the majority of my day. I'm not losing time or losing focus by having to go somewhere else. So that's just a little kind of nuanced topic that we're seeing in a lot of cases that is very different than I think what we would have seen, even 15, 20 years ago. I know some of the images I was maybe showing were showing that vibrancy of a younger, maybe an elementary level space, but I wanted to talk a little bit even about our older students, that middle school and high school level. And I think we've heard this kind of rhetoric that's out in there that, middle school settings are looking more like high schools and high school settings are looking more like college campuses. And I think really what this is a testament to is the fact that at those ages, we're really looking to empower those students to be their own advocate, to say, this is what I need today. This is how I want to learn. And I need an environment that's going to support that. We're giving them the autonomy to choose. And so you'll see in these settings, again, a lot of that same thing, but at a broader scale. I'm seeing the opportunity to meet in different size groups, to go into maybe a small group space and just learn with a friend, to integrate with technology, present my materials to maybe some of my peers, all of those different things that are really allowing the student to make those choices. And in order to best support that wellness and give them that autonomy, we have to have those spaces that provide that level of choice. And so you'll see the, comfy and quiet that might look like your local coffee shop, that I'm going and I'm just sitting down and putting my head down and doing some work. But I'm also looking at spaces that allow for students to be messy and loud and to create and explore their learning in a very different way. And then finally, thinking about how it is a collaboration space. This is almost an active commons space that you see here where you can work individually, sure, but I can also just connect and collaborate with my peers. The media centers are now that much more a space of community and connection than they were previously. So I think that largest takeaway is being that no two students are alike, and these spaces are really the opportunity to create an environment that will cater to each and every learner. So thank you very much, Matt, for having me on to share some of that with you and everyone else that's here today.
No, thank you. That was fantastic. I wanted to ask you, how have you seen the role of libraries and media centers evolve in educational settings over the past few years? And then what do you believe are the key factors driving this change?
Oh, sure. That's a great question. I think the evolution really is coming from, these spaces were underutilized. As technology became something that was in our hands, and was that readily accessible, we didn't need to walk down the hall and go to the library to, look something up and do research. And so I think that evolution is really is being driven by that. That was definitely a key factor that drove us to say, how do we use this space? Does it just go away, or is there another purpose that it can provide for us? And so I think the question then became is, what do we need? What do our school districts need that we can't necessarily provide in the individual classroom and would really benefit from a shared amenity within our buildings? And so a lot of that was that space for collaboration. A lot of it was, an extension of the classroom, just so that we can be doing, in the classroom setting, you're not just sitting and learning any longer either. And so we're spreading out, we're doing a lot of those group things, even in the classroom. And so now I need, this becomes an extension where we can spread out even further and we can engage in a different way. And then finally, I think it was really that hands-on learning. A lot of our library spaces hold a connection to maybe a STEM space, some type of creation maker space. I know one of my fellow panelists had, a green wall for broadcasting and things like that. And all of those are something that are better as sort of a shared amenity that the media center can kind of be a hub for.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks to all four of our panelists. All of those presentations were fantastic. And now we'd like to bring everybody back and do a quick group discussion, ask a few quick questions to everybody, and then perfect. Okay. Our first question comes from our audience, and it is, with libraries evolving from a place with kind of traditional stacks, do libraries now require staff with different skills and specialties than they did before?
I'll jump in really quickly. I think that's certainly a topic that I've heard a number of the school districts I work with talking about. I think there's a different mentality of someone that is a librarian versus perhaps someone that is more of a media center specialist. And perhaps that is coming from that individual places that, that school district in my world. It's coming from the programs they're trying to offer in those spaces. So if it is a library that includes, a STEM room that's attached or some other programmatic element, that may change the need and the skill set required by the individual that's kind of running that space. So I have seen instances where that is the case, but I really believe it's going to come from the programming and sort of the intentionality that the district is looking to have with that environment.
And I would just jump in and say at Northeastern, there's Snell Library. There's definitely staff there that you wouldn't expect to see in a library. I talked a little bit about the experiential learning that happens on the second floor. Some of the technology experts that are there as a resource for students. Research in and of itself. There are specialists in research that are, again, more geared towards technology and being able to access information and be able to find the right information to make their research, usable. So many of those experiential learning spaces, audio, visual, production, technology, they all require a specific expertise that, in the past was not part of a library staff requirement.
Just a couple things to add here. Part of our library is actually classrooms. The staff actually teach classes on how to research, which I think, while that's a traditional role, it's still like a role that's needed, especially in this age where information is at your fingertips. But I think there is a shift. We had a lot of conversations about whether you put book gates in. We're seeing, and I'd love to hear from some of the other panelists as well. We're seeing some libraries actually not having the same control over the books and sort of accepting that some books will not come back and will sort of be distributed throughout campus. So in the end, the district wanted to put those controls in, but I do see potentially a shift from that sort of stamping your book out to sort of a freedom of information.
Yeah, I think anecdotally, I've definitely heard that if a book doesn't come back, the school, the librarian's not going to be heartbroken over that. They're just glad that someone came and liked it enough to keep it.
Yeah, which is a total shift from the role that some of us grew up in with.
I think it's hard for a lot of the institutions to let go of that security component. They do invest a lot in the collections that they do have, and although they like to see them disseminated and used, they also want to have them available to everybody. Goes both ways.
And we had a little bit of a follow-up question from our audience on that front. And it's, I found a lot of K-12 public schools do still have large collections of books even after purging, and it can be a struggle to accommodate all of them with all of the modernizations. How do you handle when they want to have space for a large capacity of books when there's not enough space for everything?
I think technologies, oh, go ahead.
Sure, I'll jump in. I think when we've talked about weeding with some of our clients, we consider offsite storage for collections, and they typically have the data on utilization of which collections are more popular and which aren't. And if a student still wants to check out a book, that might be offsite, right? They just have to get it the next day. So that's been one possible solution to making sure that you still get to prioritize space in your library and media center for engagement rather than for collections.
Yeah, that was the same thing I was going to jump in with, is that with how far technology has come, that students can almost go online and sort of, reserve or request a specific book. If it doesn't happen to be on the shelf right there, it's usually within a day that someone can go pull that from whether it's an offsite. I know some districts, maybe they happen to have space in the building. I know that's usually a rare commodity though too. Maybe it's just in an adjacent room where you keep that larger collection. But then I think on the other side of that, what I've seen and heard is that they're doing their best then to rotate that collection, thinking about what are sort of the hot picks maybe for this month, or having a connection to what's being taught in the curriculum in other subject matters, that they can kind of rotate in materials that would support maybe a lesson that's being taught in history for something like that.
Okay. And then I wanted to switch gears. I think kind of zooming out, backing up, and thinking in a little bit broader strokes, what are some of your recommended best practices for schools looking to revamp their library facilities? Where do they start? What should they focus on? How can they make the most effective changes on a potentially limited budget? And then maybe what are some smaller action items that they can get started on sooner than later to kind of tip that first domino over or get the ball rolling?
I think I have a nice project story really related to what we were just talking about with weeding collections and offsite storage. I've been working with Purdue University for a few years. We just completed their library's master plan, and then sort of the first stepping stone renovation project with them at their humanities, social sciences, and education library. They were talking about this a lot. How do we, as we're facing increasing enrollment, how do we handle making sure that we have additional highly needed study space for students on campus? So they moved 1.5 million volumes into high density storage off campus, offsite, and reprioritized that space back for student study space. They found that we added 270 new seats in this library, and it's been open for over a year now, and they've been reporting a 200% increase in utilization of the library for students now. It is just busy and bustling at all times. So, but this refresh for them, this project wasn't terribly expensive. So I think that's my takeaway here for folks, is your refresh on a tight budget doesn't have to be extravagant. Reallocating collections and opening space, but then you're just talking about flexible furniture solutions, and then don't underestimate the power of some fresh paint, carpet, and a high-performing acoustical ceiling and some LED lighting really go a long way on a tight budget to make maximum impact.
I think that's a great point. I'd love to just piggyback on it, because that's a lot of what I was thinking, is that it doesn't have to be, tearing the whole thing down and starting from nothing. I think there's a lot that you can do with just, a fresh coat of paint, some flexible furniture. I think there really is a big amount of impact you can make with simple moves like that. But the other piece I think that I always think about is really just talking to your teams, thinking, what do you want the space to be? Nick made a comment about, they needed study space. So what can we do to create that? And I think that's really where that visioning needs to start, is how do you think you might, is there something that's lacking that this space can provide? whether it's access to a program or just a certain support and amenity for your students. And then from there, I think you can find a lot of different ways in which you can achieve that as an outcome.
Yeah, I agree. Starting with the programmatic needs of the space, like what do the spaces need to do to help students thrive, is really the starting point for me. And also pulling in what kind of adjacent resources or programs that might complement the spaces that are needed. Sometimes to activate, but also sometimes just to make the spaces easy to access. So completely agree.
I'll just chime in on, kind of from a construction perspective. Libraries are obviously pretty mission critical to schools and colleges, right? So one of the keys when you're renovating is really about limiting impact. How do you do that? How much space can you take offline at a time? How many seats are we losing when we take a floor of a library offline? And, what are the priority spaces that we want to get done as soon as possible or by a certain date? So it's really all about the planning, during both design and construction, developing that kind of carefully molded phasing plan and approach to construction early on, and then communicating this to staff and students again and again and again, because you tell them once and they kind of get it, but it doesn't sink in. You got to keep telling them, especially as impacts are about to happen. There's going to be a noise, we're doing demolition. We're going to be making a lot of noise, or we're going to take this offline for a certain period of time. And also about including the right people in the planning and programming process so that everybody's aware of what's going to be happening, and there's no surprises in the end. Renovating your library is going to be noisy, it's going to be disruptive, but what I've seen is if you limit surprises and people know it's coming, people can work around it and still use and enjoy the spaces that are available.
Okay, we have a couple minutes left, and I guess I wanted to get everybody's really quick thoughts on one last topic, and that is, do you have any predictions on future trends for libraries and media centers?
I had an interesting project just about a year ago, and I think this is a trend that I'm seeing. It's that connection to of bringing kind of cross-pollination of different kind of curricular elements into a single place. So it was a library renovation. They had an adjacent classroom, used to be a computer lab, obviously didn't need that any longer. So it's how do we use this space and kind of tie it into this central hub of our building? And what they created was, it was a cross-pollination between their business class and their culinary arts. So during the day, it's sort of an extension of the library. It offers a very flexible environment. But before and after school, it actually serves as kind of a cafe. And the culinary students, in partnership with this business class, actually sell some baked goods to students. So I feel like moments like that are some of the great opportunities and future trends of how do we just better integrate kind of everybody.
Yeah, I just want to add.
Okay. Go for it.
Just very quickly, I think as I presented in my portion, I think libraries as a social destination, which is sort of what Alison was speaking to, that overlap of functions and, meeting not just for study, but actually for those like human connections that I think, which we have a danger of like losing the textural experience and really I think a continuation of the trend to make libraries, these crucial destinations, not just for quiet study, but for much more.